I'm Erin Lawler Patterson, the Goodness Chick. I'm an international speaker, life coach, author, and proud part of the Mental Health News Radio Network. Join me on the journey of empowering you to kick butt in life, not get kicked by life, addressing mental health, relationships, self-care, and giving back. So if you enjoy listening to the Goodness Chick podcast, I encourage you to hop on patreon.com/goodnesschick and find out how you can become a supporter of the show and helping keeping the message and the vibes going on a global level, which is a pretty awesome thing. So today's guest, Sarah Regn, I met her when she was a student in high school. She really just kind of stood out from the crowd just with her passion for life, the humility she possessed, her desire to serve other people, and just being an all-around fantastic human being. Fast forward a number of years later, Sarah is currently teaching in Taiwan, where on every day she shares on social media the lessons she has learned from her students within the classroom, as well as the zest she has for life through daily treks she takes in her town, to road trips taking her from Indonesia, the Philippines, or wherever else. She doesn't talk about living. She chooses to live, and it's ever more the richer due to her passion to serve others. In the midst of the coronavirus, her passion to help others and her coloring the heck out of life cannot be stifled. We choose how we react to different things in our life. We choose whether we allow ourselves, give ourselves permission to step forward and actually live. We can say we're all physically alive. Many people out there are not really living. And I am really excited for today's episode, and I'm excited that you're here to listen and tune in to today's show. All right, so very excited to have today's guest that is not in Florida, that is not in the United States, coming to me live and you from Taiwan. What town are you in again, Miss Sarah Regn?
Hello, everybody. I am reporting from Taichung, Taiwan. Over on the west coast of Taiwan, here we have beautiful mountains and a big city.
And a big city, and a young lady with a massive heart that is just doing some gnarly things. I know you had said you've been teaching there, and you're kind of like in a funky period right now with where you're located geographically. That you've been given kind of 3 weeks of there's no school, but yet you still have school as a teacher. If you want to explain a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of people have heard on the news about this Wuhan virus, and it's definitely affected a lot of Asian countries and people all over the world. So Taiwan, China, Macau, Hong Kong are all taking really serious precautions, and they've canceled school for students for the next 3 weeks. So although I would love to be, traveling to other countries right now, it's also maybe not the wisest. And I'm also required to be at work. So if I'm not at work, I don't get paid. But so I'm here, and it's
and
good.
You're at work.
And we're making the most of it for sure.
Yeah, you are, which is a good thing. So you are in Taiwan. You're a teacher. What brought you to Taiwan?
Yeah. So probably my whole life, I think when I was in 4th grade, I really wanted to do the Peace Corps. I had a teacher that talked about it, and I was like, that just sounds so amazing, going to another place and learning. That was when I was in 4th grade. And then in college, I was like, how can I be abroad? My sophomore year, I did a service trip to Nicaragua, and in a third world country, and that was just absolutely incredible and eye-opening and extremely humbling. And then after graduate school, I was continuing thinking, how can I teach abroad? I feel like that's just such a good tool for my toolkit and my school bag, for my future students and classroom. So I was recommended, the Fulbright program was recommended to me. So right after college, I applied and I got in, and it was the wildest experience. I never thought of myself as a Fulbright scholar. And right after,
it's pretty massive. That is a huge, really, that's massive. So mazel tov.
Yeah. And it's funny, I think it comes with like a big, like identity almost. And like when you say Fulbright, people go, wow.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I don't think necessarily of the title, but I just think about like what I did. and the kids that I impacted. And I was just a teacher, and a teacher's impact is so profound. So like that is the label that I love. And so I flew right after I graduated, a month later or 2 months. I left in the beginning of July and I graduated in May, and I shipped off to Taiwan, and I flew to a really small island, and I was one of 27 foreigners on that island alone, and taught in a public school. And I loved Taiwan so much that I decided to stay a second year, and now I work at an international school.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about your posts on Facebook and social media is how much joy that it seems like you're just receiving from not only teaching, but being in a different culture and with the kids you're working with. And that's one of the things I think is such a beautiful thing, is when we realize that whatever position we have in life, and no matter what age we are, we can learn from each other. Like your students, would you say, have taught you a lot?
Oh, so sincerely, so much. Like whether it's Chinese or just about life, you know. My favorite moments, I lived on a small island, and I would just knock on my kids' doors, so casual, knock on their doors, and I would have tea with their grandparents, and we would celebrate birthdays together, and we would just play outside in basketball. And the simple moments just brought me such sincere joy. I love it. And I recently just traveled to the Philippines and Bali, and I made it, I care about the local community so much when I travel. When I go on vacations, I don't go to resorts. I go out in the community. I stay at homestays and Airbnbs and hostels. And I just went out in the Philippines. I drove out to some farms, and I like sat on the street with some locals, and we played basketball for an hour, and it was the best day that I had traveling. And it was just connecting with people. I think that's the most important thing you can do as a human: connect and care to connect.
And I think that connection is massive. And you know, there's so many things I think that could be normal sayings for people. And one of those, which I have said in my lifetime, is like, well, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. This is once in a lifetime. And where we kind of think like that massive impact that we have, like that mountain we see, that journey, that vacation that we took or whatever, it's like selective and it's isolated. And one quote that you had put out there was that I loved: I like to climb the mountains of my life, not just sit and watch. I don't believe in once in a lifetime. This life is too good to let it move by without enjoying the ride. And I just think that's so beautiful, where we can kind of categorize, like, I can have these experiences when I retire, or I can do this every 3 years, or it's kind of like whether we think we don't deserve it, or that's too much. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So that was a quote that I commented on a family member of mine. And I said it because he was like, well, you just look like you have fun all the time. And I was like, he made it seem like it was a bad thing that I was enjoying my life. And I think it's funny because I do think like there are too many beautiful mountains. And to be honest, whether if I'm in a Thailand or China or Italy, or if I'm in the United States teaching in a school, I still think that myself as a person would still find such sincere joy in whatever community I happen to land in. And I think you raise a really good point, that we often think of our lives and we're always shooting for these really, really grandiose goals, right? These really, really big goals. But sometimes we just need small steps, and just smiling to a stranger, or having like a moment of kindness throughout your day, like that can bring such sincere joy. You don't always need to climb a mountain, but you need to acknowledge its goodness and like embrace the life and the breath that you have in your lungs, and how
because it's a
we are.
gift. And whether, you know, I was going to say, you're like, whether it's Italy or Taiwan or South Jersey, it's a choice to make. There's people that would just look past beauty and let it slip through their fingertips just because so preoccupied with things that truly are distraction. And whether that's that sunset in your backyard, or it's, climbing, doing I don't know, a 5K, or whatever it is, one extreme to the other, it's choosing to be joyful. It's choosing to find those little beautiful moments that we've been given in life, because it's a gift. And I think when we begin to pursue that joy and acknowledge, like, life's a gift. It's not a given, but it's being intentional. And one of the things that you had thrown out there was how that kind of coincides with the aspect of kindness, right? And one of the things I want to ask you about, like, I'm going to do another Sarah Wren quote, is that you had said, I'm looking for your quote here, the world is dark, but that does not mean you should compromise your light. Let it shine, and may you may you be the strand and be the stitch on someone else's quilt that makes them believe in good. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so true, where it's this alignment that we have to make decisions in life. Part of that being, you pursue joy, you pursue finding the value in beautiful things, even when it's hard to do that. And then on the other end of it, where does that kindness and compassion come in? So what say you about that?
Yeah, I find that in our kindness, we make it seem like it's a hard thing. And it's sometimes really hard to choose right and doing right. But we also have this idea of service. It has to be through an organization, or it has to be like, to be kind, you need to pay a lot of money or do something really big. And it's not as big as that. And the joys in our life, like smiling at a stranger, or seeing somebody with their head down and just going up to them and putting your hand on their shoulder, just saying, can I sit with you for a minute? And I would, if I can, talk about the man that I met.
Please, yes, I was going to reference that, yeah.
Yeah. So I live in a city right now, and Taiwan is very different from America. There are not so many people experiencing homelessness, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And the city I live in, I scooter everywhere. And it's just such a big city, so it's really hard to get around if you don't have your own scooter. And one day, a friend asked me to go to lunch with her. And I had so many things to do, but I was like, you know what? I felt called to go. And like, talking about those callings and things, those like deep down gut feelings, I listen to it as often as I can, and it usually ends up in a good place. I end up in a good place. So we walked by the train station, which I don't often go to. And there was a man sitting there, and I noticed everyone moving off of the sidewalk and away from him. Like, the proximity of him was too much for the people to handle. And my eyes automatically went to his blackened feet. And they were just they were covered in soot, and they were broken and cracked. And my heart like just went to this man, and automatically I just felt, I need to wash this man's feet. I have to do it. I have to touch him. I have to show him that I care and I see him. So I went to lunch with my friend, and I said, listen, I have to go and do something. I'll see you later. And I went immediately to the Watson's is our like convenience store. And I went there and I grabbed antibacterial wipes, snacks, and socks. And it cost me all of, I think, maybe $3 to $5. And I sat with this man, and in Chinese said, "Ni hao ma," which is how are you? And then I asked like, "What a kai," and I would sit down with him. And then I asked if I could shisha, which is wash his feet. And he said yes. And I looked him in the eye, and I sat with him. And even though my Chinese is not so good, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
You know,
that's where words aren't even needed.
Yeah. It mattered the person next to me. And a lot of people started to stop, which was incredible. It was, people were finally seeing people, and people were trying to connect. But in our lives, I think when we think about, that's like a good way to think about the joys in our life. We can just pass by and not even realize the human next to us, or not even realize the sunset or the sunrise in the morning, because we have to get from point A to B. I need to get from where I was to lunch, and I could have chose not to look around, but I that I did. And I think that man had so much just joy and warmth in his heart, as I hope as much as I did, just being with each other. And the whole way I cried walking back to my scooter, because I was just thinking what a vessel my body was for Christ in that moment, and how it wasn't necessarily me doing that, but it was the Lord. And it was me saying yes to Christian values. I don't think you need to be religious to be a good person. I don't think that you need to go to church every Sunday to be kind. But I think if you care about people, and if you say yes to people and what they need, and acknowledging that we need to connect with each other, then I think this world would be a nice, kinder place, and I think our quilts would be interwoven more.
Well, it's that you'd said that touch, that connection, you looking him directly in the eye, one person to another, and there's so many times that just slips by our fingertips. And a prayer that I have prayed every day for many years has been, God, please give me the eyes that Jesus had, where he would go through his day, and it was, he sought out the person that was hurting, right? The person that maybe was downtrodden, who just was, an outcast or whatever it is, or just was lost somebody, was grieving, was whatever it was, word we attached to it. But we're lacking so much of that. And I think in today's world, Christ's commandments is love your neighbor as yourself. And we could say that, but how do you practice that? How do you live that? And it's going through our days where there's so many hurting people, and that act of you extending yourself, where you could have easily hey, I've got to be somewhere and I'm thinking about what's next, and I'm going with my friend to lunch, and totally, like you had said, bypass that gentleman. That experience that you had rocked your world, and it most certainly rocked his, where he felt the aspect of just human touch, the aspect of just connecting with another human being's eyes. And it doesn't have to be somebody, you might say, well, I don't see homeless people during the day. I can promise you, you will see people who are hurting when we choose to open our eyes, so much more than you can possibly comprehend. And it could be, like you had said, smiling, because people say, oh my God, I can't be that therapist. I don't want to, whoa, calm down, relax, you're taking sleeping. Just smile, say hello, get all crazy trained and buy a 99-cent cup of McDonald's coffee or whatever, this tea around the corner in Taiwan, and leave it for someone and say, you're beautiful, you're awesome. Little things of goodness that will change someone's life. And that's what loving your neighbor is. It's easy to say, love your neighbor, and don't do this and do this. When we apply it to our lives and truly seek to have the eyes of Christ, it will rock your world. And that is connected to that joy, that kindness, that sense of peace that's just beautiful, that, when all this other craziness doesn't matter, and allowing ourselves to really soak in the substance of life. And I think I know that's a just wicked important thing that will rock your world. And I'm watching it every day when I see you. When did I'm trying to think when we first met, how many years ago, and you've always stood out, where I've met tons of kids, high school students who are all awesome, but you were an exception because you chose, since you were, and I didn't know you before high school, to just rise above and pursue joy, and pursue that seeking out eye contact with that kid in the hallway, to the teacher or whoever it was. And it's that you've now are passing that baton to your students, and you're passing that baton to people, globally, and it's amazing, but it's a choice, because you could have easily, like in a poker game, folded, peace, I don't want to do this, but you're pursuing it. And I think that's just such a fantastic thing to cling to. I know I'm going off here, but you inspire me, Sarah Regn. I lift my
cheers. Thank you so much.
Cheers, baby.
It's just and it's hard for me to think of the opposite, of not choosing kindness. It's just because I think my brain automatically goes, how is that person feeling? And what would I want? if I was them? How I always am constantly thinking of putting myself in other people's shoes. And I think it doesn't have to be complex. It really doesn't. Just like you said, it's a smile, right? It's the eye contact. And I think that's genuine. I think a lot of us with social media is amazing, and I love it because I'm able to connect with so many people on it. However, there are these false realities, right? Or these false perception of life. But a lot of people look at me and they're like, you're just so genuine. Even like when you post something, it's just like a really genuine and raw piece. And I think if we stop fabricating our lives or our goodness and we just do it, we don't ask for the applause and we just do it and we share it to inspire others, like this world would just be so much kinder, such a kinder place. And I find, so I teach second grade now, and every day I'm with my kids and I'm saying, was that a kind gesture? What does kindness mean? We have these thematic projects. I did this kindness rock project with my students last year, and I had them go out into the community and grab a rock. And then we painted the rocks and we decorated them. On one side, we wrote an English affirmation. You are kind, you are beautiful. And on the other side, they wrote the Chinese translation. Some of these kids who never like raised their hand to speak in my class, they wrote some of the most beautiful messages and words on these rocks. This one boy of mine, he was a little bit rowdy and he always had a hard time with the other teachers. On his rock, he said, do not be afraid. We are with you. Come on, we will carry you. And it was so beautiful. And then after they painted the rocks, I told them, go home and put it out into the community. And so the kids had the rocks, and I said, how does this feel when you pick up the rock? And on one side, you're learning English, but on the other side, you get affirmed. And the kids, they just took the project and totally sailed with it. And it was incredible. But that was a small way to not only show these kids what it means to be kind and how easy it can be, but to also, feel the empowerment to go out into the community and share with their parents and their moms and their dads and their uncles, what it means to be kind.
And I think when we begin to encourage people about all these things we've talked about, we get filled and we get excited, and those people, it's a domino effect. Like that gentleman you talked about on the side of the road, how people's eyes, boom, began to be popped open, and they in turn began to look at things differently. And how crazy cool is that?
Oh,
South Jersey girl, and it's cool.
South Jersey. Represent. It's just it's so filling. And I think I remember like leaving with that gentleman, and I mentioned that I was crying, but I was also thinking about, I could have all the money in the world and I could go anywhere, but like I felt more filled being with that man than I would have been jumping off a plane. Yeah. Like there's such a sense of joy and exuberance that fills your heart when you just selflessly served another person. Yeah. And that's something that is free. Yeah. And that is easy.
And it's simple. Fun. It's easy. It's easy. It's simple. And I'm going to use another Sarah Wren quote. Boom. Here we go. The problem with humanity is we keep chasing things, wanting bigger and better. We complicate it. If you want a simple life, then live a simple life. It's as easy as that. And it's so true. I love the United States, but too often in so many Western countries, parts of the world, we layer and we make things so much more complicated, and it's keeping up with the Joneses and all this stuff, and these ideas that are just more complicated than they need to be. Some of the most beautiful, content, contagious humans I've ever met, at the very least. Yeah. And willing to just give you the shirt off their back, and like they don't know where their next meal's coming from, and sitting and just them knowing how to just be still, how to sit for 2 hours over a cup of coffee without checking their cell phones and without thinking what's next. And just, it's relationships, it's human connection.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I was on the mountain with a man who we were talking about that. And I was looking around and I was like, I live in a big city now, and I used to live on an island, and I miss it. And we just went back and forth, and he said, so go back. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just go. Why not? If a simple life is what you desire, then live it.
Mm-hmm. I think simple, although it can be, we're saying, oh my God, simple is easier to attain than we realize, but it's like simple makes life easier. It really does. I mean, we live in a really small apartment now, and it was really by choice. We're a block from the beach. We have a tenth of what we used to own a few years ago, and I will tell you, I'm so much more content. And I am continually seeking to have a mentality and a lifestyle that accommodates minimalism. Because when we complicate it and when we just add crap that we don't need, emotionally, mentally, physically, it wears us down. And so what I see you depicting on a daily basis is it's just inspiring. It's gnarly. And I say to you, you guys that are listening, soak it in. And no matter who you are and where you're listening to, as long as we're breathing, as long as there's a pulse, check that pulse, boom, it's there. There's always room for growth. There's always room for change. And if we maintain a sedentary state of mind, dangerous, nothing happens. And that's a bummer because we all have one life. And so with that, how are you going to choose to live it? Assuming and seeking the eyes of Christ, pursuing simplicity, enjoying and pursuing joy, or settling. Don't settle. And Sarah Regn of South Jersey and Taiwan, I want to say it has been an honor to have you on the show, girlfriend. I love you. And I'll give you a hug, girlfriend, in real life.
Air hug.
And I want to say to all you guys listening, wishing you an immense amount of peace, love, and goodness. If you enjoyed today's episode, there's a lot more encouragement and life-kicking strategies on goodnesschick.com. Have a great day, my friends.